Welcome. Tonight, you're invited to rest, to unwind, and to drift gently into a world of calm. As the fire flickers and the warmth surrounds you, we'll travel quietly through the pages of forgotten history. No rush, no urgency, just time and quiet reflection. Let your breath slow, and let the past become your guide into a peaceful night. The eternal city before the empire. Imagine a city, not yet carved in marble, nor crowned with triumphal arches, but a quiet collection of hills, bathed in mist, where myths wandered freely, and every stone still whispered secrets. This is Rome. Not as an empire, not as a republic, but as a gentle beginning, a cradle of stories, before power, before glory. Close your eyes. Let the present dissolve, and let us walk through the eternal city before it was eternal. There were 7 hills, Aventine, Palatine, Capitoline, and for more, rising like soft humps. Along the banks of the slow-moving Tiber, no columns yet, no emperors, only small huts of straw and clay, shepherds tending flocks, fishermen casting nets, children laughing by the riverside. The rhythm of life was simple, the pacey, unhurried. Nature and humanity lived side by side, and the god, they lived just above the clouds. Each morning, the first light touched the Palatine hill. It was said that Romulus had lived here, the child of Mars, suckled by a she-wolf, chosen to found this city by signs in the sky. But that was legend. Still, the stories gave the people comfort and purpose. Fires were kindled at dawn. Women gathered water in clay pots. The scent of herbs drifted in the air. Lavender, rosemary, wild fennel. And in the distance, the sacred geese of Juno stirred in the forum. Just a clearing, then elders sat in circles. They spoke slowly, carefully. Words mattered. Silence mattered more. There were no senators yet, but wisdom already had a seat. Offerings were left at shrines, figs, olive oil, small carved tokens. Not to bribe the gods, but to remain in rhythm with them. At night, the stars glittered over rooftops of thatch. Children huddled close, listening to tales of Aeneas and of a burning city far away called Troy. Wind rustled through the cypress trees. Dogs barked in the distance, and the city, so young, dreamed quietly of what it might one day become. There were no legions, no gladiators, no golden coins stamped with faces, but there was poetry, spoken, not written. There was song, in the cadence of footsteps and the rustling of laurel leaves in sacred groves. Priests, known as augurs, climbed the hills to read omens in the flight of birds. Their staffs traced invisible lines in the sky, every flutter, every arc, a message from the divine, and down below, life moved gently. Days were long, nights longer. Time was still learning how to march. No aqueducts yet, only streams winding through meadows. No stone roads yet, only paths worn by sandals and stories. But already, something timeless had taken root. A spirit, a pulse, a quiet strength. Rome before Rome. was a murmur in the hills, a whisper in the trees, a flicker of firelight in the dark of the ancient world, and even now, if you listen carefully, you might still hear it, a city dreaming itself into being, not with conquest, but with patience, not with monuments, but with memory, not with glory, but with grace. The Gardeners of Babylon, a slow journey through the legendary Hanging Gardens, blending historical imagination and peaceful scenes of ancient horticulture and engineering. There is a story, one that drifts between fact and myth, of a garden that defied the desert, a place of shade and fragrance, of cascading vines and cool water, suspended high above the dust of ancient Mesopotamia. They called them the Hanging Gardens, and though no ruins remain, the dream endures. Let us close our eyes and walk slowly through the gardens of Babylon. The air is warm, but not harsh. A dry breeze carries scents of myrrh and jasmine. Stone paths curve gently between terraces, rising like stairways to the sky. You hear the soft trickle of water, channels that weave like silver threads. Feeding roots with care, these are not wild gardens, but crafted ones, tended by gentle hands and watered by wisdom. A gardener bends beside a fig tree, his robe brushing the earth. He moves slowly, as if time itself has no urgency. He touches each leaf with reverence, not as a servant of kings, but as a steward of life. Far below, the city of Babylon hums with merchants, oxen, and scribes. But here, up high in the terraces, there is only quiet. Only the rhythm of nature, cultivated by patient minds. Olive trees stretch their silver-green branches. Clusters of grapes hang heavy in the shade. And from ceramic basins, lotus flowers bloom their petals, opening slowly, greeting the morning sun. Birds rest in the branches of pomegranate trees. Their songs are soft, scattered like sunlight. It is said these gardens were built for love. A queen from a distant land, missing her forested home, longed for green amidst the golden sands. And so the king, moved by longing, commanded a wonder to rise. Stone by stone, soil by soil, a mountain of life was made to grow, not to impress, but to comfort, not to conquer, but to care. You pass under an arch draped in vines. Each leaf dances slightly in the breeze. Water drips in slow rhythm from tier to tier, cool, clear, ancient. Cypress trees stand like sentinels. Their shade is deep and still. You feel the hush of history settling on your shoulders like warm silk. In the corners of the garden, small tablets rest, etched not with laws or decrees, but with the names of plants. The Babylonians knew each one, their roots, their healing, their stories. Lavender for calm, cedar for strength, mint for clarity, each with a purpose, each with a spirit. Some say the gardens never existed, that they were just a dream, a poetic imagining of what paradise might be, but as you stand here, in this quiet bloom, you feel no doubt. Myth or memory, it doesn't matter. The peace is real, The stillness is real, and so the story lives. A gardener carries a clay jar of water. He pours slowly into the earth. A ritual repeated for centuries, or perhaps only in dreams. But either way, it brings comfort above. Vines curl toward the sky. Below, shadows stretch and sway. You sit by a shallow pool, its surface unbroken, a mirror of time. No noise, no urgency, only green, only breath, only rest. These are the gardens of Babylon. And whether they ever stood in brick and blossom, or only in the heart, they are here now, and they are yours. The Forgotten Mapmakers of Ptolemaic Egypt, a quiet story tracing the delicate art of ancient cartography in Alexandria, where scholars gently sketched the shape of the known world. The world once felt immeasurable, an ocean without end, a sky without edges, and lands that stretched forever, unnamed and unexplored. But in a quiet corner of ancient Alexandria, there were those who tried to give shape to the unknown, not with armies, not with ships, but with ink and parchment and patient thought. They were the forgotten mapmakers, and this is their story. The day begins slowly in the Library of Alexandria. Columns cast long shadows across smooth floors. Scrolls whisper softly in the breeze. Dust floats like golden mist in shafts of morning light. Inside a small chamber near the edge of the great library, two scholars unroll a worn sheet of papyrus. Their fingertips move gently, as if touching a living thing. One dips a reed pen into dark ink. The other measures the distance between cities using lengths of knotted string. The room smells faintly of ink, aged parchment, and olive oil lamps. They draw, but not as artists. They draw as seekers, tracers of knowledge. Each line holds more than geography. It holds curiosity, and the hope that the world might be knowable. Through soft conversation, they name lands not yet seen. They debate the shape of rivers. They guess at coastlines drawn from stories brought by sailors with sun-worn faces and distant eyes. Maps here are not exact. They are tender, a blending of reason and imagination. Outside the harbour bustles, ships from Carthage, Rhodes, and India arrive laden with cinnamon, scrolls, and silk. Sailors tell stories of stars that shift in the southern sky, of mountains that breathe fire, of birds that speak with voices like men. The mapmakers listen, not to believe, but to wonder, and to translate that wonder into lines and curves. Ptolemy himself once walked these halls. A thinker of wide vision, he tried to measure the world with math and dreams. He calculated latitudes. He placed cities on invisible grids. He believed the earth was round, not because he saw it, but because logic whispered it must be back. In the small chamber, a map nears completion. Not finished, because a map is never finished, but enough to breathe, enough to rest. There is a beauty in the imperfection, in coastlines that waver, and mountains drawn too tall or too small, because every map, like every life, is a work in progress. The scholars stretch their backs. They sip cool water from clay cups, and for a while they sit in silence, listening to the soft creak of the building, the flutter of birds outside the window, the rhythm of their own thoughts. They are not famous. Their names are not etched in stone, but they gave the world a frame, a beginning. They made the earth feel a little smaller, and the sky a little closer. Their maps did not conquer. They did not divide. They connected one place to another, one idea to the next. A journey of the mind drawn slowly with love. So tonight, as your breath slows and your eyes begin to close, imagine a map unfolding in your mind, not of countries or borders, but of dreams, of all the places you've imagined and all the peace you've yet to find. Let it drift gently into the dark, carried by stars, marked with moonlight, and let the forgotten map makers guide you through the quiet shapes of sleep. The tea house at the edge of the Mongol Empire. A soft tale from the far reaches of the Silk Road, where merchants, monks, and travelers paused to rest beneath the gentle hush of mountain skies. There is a place, not found on most maps, where the wind slows and the world grows quiet. A place between empires, between the rise of dawn and the setting of stars. A resting point. At the edge of the Mongol world, there, tucked between dunes and highlands, sits a small tea house. It is old, made of wood and clay, warmed by embers and filled with the soft murmur of time. Let us enter. The door creaks gently. A bell chimes, no louder than a breath. Inside, the scent of roasted barley and pine smoke wraps around you. Cushions line the walls. A single pot rests on a low stone hearth, its surface shimmering with steam. The tea master bows slowly. She is quiet, with silvered hair and kind eyes. She gestures for you to sit. You do, and the world begins to slow. Outside, the road stretches for miles. Merchants pass with silk and lapis. Pilgrims whisper prayers beneath their breath. Nomads hum songs passed down by stars. But here, within these walls, there is only warmth. Only stillness. She pours the first cup. Green leaves unfold like paper boats. Steam curls and dances in the light. You sip, and everything softens. The bitterness is gentle like a memory. The warmth travels through you like peace. Other guests arrive. A traveler from Samarkand, a monk from Sian, a poet in dusty robes, carrying verses stitched into his sleeve. Each bows, each is welcomed. No names are needed here, only quiet, only tea. The wind outside picks up, it howls against the roof, but the fire glows steady, and laughter soft and slow fills the room like incense. The tea master smiles. She pours again. Here, time does not pass. It pools like still water. You are not waiting. You are not hurrying. You are simply. Here, there is no need to speak. The silence speaks enough. A painting on the wall shows the world as one great road. Cities bloom like flowers along it. Baghdad, Dunhuang, Venice, Chang'an. But here, in this little dot between them all, You've found a kind of stillness that no map can capture. The monk takes out a small flute. He plays 3 notes. No more, just enough. The poet nods. The wind sighs, and the tea is poured again. You begin to drowse. Your head bows slightly. The cushions are warm. Your limbs are heavy, as if held by the earth. The tea house breathes with you, soft, slow, steady. Perhaps you'll sleep here tonight. Perhaps you'll dream of deserts and mountain passes, of open skies and quiet inns, of warmth found in distant places, and in kind strangers. In the morning you may leave, or you may stay, but you'll carry the memory of this peaceful refuge. This tea house at the edge of empires, where the world stopped rushing, and simply let you be. The bell makers of ancient Korea. A gentle story of master artisans who shaped bronze into echoes of harmony, faith, and timeless resonance. There is a village deep in the green valleys of ancient Silla, where the morning mist drapes itself gently over the earth, and the sound of a bell travels for miles. It is not a place of war or conquest, not a court of kings or a palace of gold, but it holds something sacred. It is the village of the bell makers. Long ago, when Korea was a land of kingdoms and quiet wisdom, these artisans worked not for glory, but for harmony. Each bell they made was a prayer, not spoken, but forged. In a workshop of earth and wood, a fire crackled low. Bronze melted slowly, as if it too needed time to awaken. The master bell maker, an old man with hands darkened by ash, would sit in silence before beginning. He did not rush. He listened to the wind, to the birds, to the hum of the earth beneath his feet. Only then would he begin to shape the mold. The process took weeks, sometimes months. Each bell required balance, mathematics and spirit, precision and intuition. He would mix clay and wax, carve lotus petals into the surface, trace dragons and clouds with gentle fingers, not to decorate, but to honor. And then, one evening, as the sky turned amber, the molten bronze would be poured, a glow like the setting. Sun would fill the room. No one spoke. Even the children held their breath. And as the bronze settled into its form, a silence even deeper than night would descend. The bell would rest for many days, cooling, becoming, when the mold was broken, and the bell finally revealed. It would be washed in river water, blessed by a monk, and hung from a wooden frame in the temple courtyard, but it was not yet ready. The first strike had to be made at dawn, before birdsong. Before breath, the monk would lift the striker, a beam of wood, worn smooth by time, and tap the bell. The sound that followed was not loud. It was round, rich, full of sky and stone, a tone so deep that it seemed to ripple through the trees. Across the rice fields, and into the hearts of those still sleeping, the people believed that a well-forged bell could reach the heavens. that its sound could call lost souls back home, carry prayers through the clouds, and soothe restless spirits. They were not wrong. Over time, the master taught his apprentice, and the apprentice, in turn, became the new master. Each added something new, a slight change to the curve, a softer alloy, a poem engraved in Hanja script along the rim. But always the essence remained. Make a bell not only to be heard, but to be felt. And so the bells continued, hung in temples on mountaintops, rung during festivals and before meditation. Some were as small as a child's arms, others taller than two men, but all shared the same voice, deep, slow, peaceful. Centuries passed, wars came and went, emperors rose and fell, but some of those bells still remain. If you walk through an ancient Korean temple, deep in the forest, where sunlight filters like silk through pine branches, you may find one, covered in moss, resting, waiting, and, if you are quiet, truly quiet, you might hear it. Not just with your ears, but with something older. You might feel the echo of the fire, of the craftsman's breath, of the river blessing, of the world held still for a moment. In bronze, so let us be still now. Like the bell, let us rest, as its song drifts slowly through time, not to wake us, but to remind us, peace has a sound, and it is deep, and calm, and kind. The library beneath the Nile, a legend gently unfolding beneath the sands of scrolls, forgotten knowledge, and the eternal river that remembers everything. There is a story not written in any book, but passed from whisper to whisper along the quiet banks of the Nile. They say that beneath the river's ancient flow, hidden by time and silt and silence, lies a library not of stone or marble, not of grand halls or columns, but one woven into the earth itself, long before Alexandria, before papyrus scrolls were copied by candlelight, before conquerors claimed the wisdom of Egypt as their own. There was a place of learning so sacred it could not remain above the surface, and so it sank. Not in ruin, but in purpose. The Nile has always been more than a river. It carries stories of life and flood, of gods and farmers, of sunrise and rebirth. But deeper still, in the dark folds of its current, something else lingers, a memory. The elders in a village near Aswan still speak of it. On rare nights, when the water runs especially still, and the moon lays flat upon the river like silver glass, they say you can hear it, a page turning, slowly, deliberately, not paper, but clay, papyrus, vellum, turning beneath the surface. According to legend, the library was created by a group of scribes and priests who feared the loss of truth in a world growing louder with ambition. They had watched scrolls burn. They had seen ink fade, words twisted by kings, and silence forced upon thinkers. So they gathered, quietly at night. They wrote not for the powerful, but for the future. Treatises on healing, maps of the stars, hymns to the river gods, observations of fish migration and moon tides, They wrote of dreams, of how to measure a man's character, of the names of every wind that passed through the reeds. They wrote to remember, and when their scrolls were many, they placed them not on shelves, but in clay vessels, sealed tight with beeswax and prayers. Then, with care, they buried them along the riverbed, where the Nile curves gently like a sleeping serpent. Each flood would cover them. Each dry season would expose them, until, one day, the earth itself pulled them inward. And they were lost to sight, but not to time, because the Nile remembers, and sometimes so does the wind. There was once a fisherman, an old man with one good eye, who told of dropping anchor near an unmarked sandbank and hearing, singing, not music, but recitation, in a tongue older than his own, a language like rustling palms, like fire through parchment. He said the sound rose from the water like breath. Others have dreamed of rooms filled with golden light, of scrolls untouched by mold or flame, of a librarian with hands made of reed and bone who asks only one question: what truth do you seek? Always the same dream, from different people, centuries apart. Coincidence, or memory returning, like the river's tide. Today, the Nile flows as it always has. Children splash along its banks. Cranes fly low in the morning haze. Fishermen cast nets without thinking of ancient scrolls. But the current knows, the silt shifts, and deep beneath the surface, the library sleeps. Perhaps one day, when the world grows still again, when the need for quiet truth returns, it will rise, not in fanfare, but gently, like a scroll unrolling in warm hands. Until then, let us imagine it, a library with no walls, a place where knowledge rests not to be owned, but to be remembered. And let us sleep like the Nile flows, deep, slow, carrying with us fragments of ancient light. The Clockmaker of Prague, a quiet tale of gears, forgotten bells, and the soul of a city that once measured time by hand and heart. In the heart of old Europe, where spires reach skyward like frozen prayers, there is a city that holds time in its stones. Prague, a city of echoes and alleyways, of quiet snowfall and whispered legends. And once long ago, there lived a man who listened to time not with his ears, but with his soul. They called him the Clockmaker. No one remembers his name, only that he lived in a room above the square, where the bells of the old astronomical clock rang not to mark the hour, but to speak to those who listened. He did not build clocks to sell. He built them to understand. Tiny brass gears, wheels within wheels, each part no larger than a breadcrumb. And yet with balance, with patience, they moved together like a miniature universe. The Clockmaker believed that time was not a line, but a breath. Inhale the past, exhale the future and the present. The stillness between, that's where he lived. In that breath, he would sit in silence for hours, tuning a pendulum, adjusting a spring by candlelight outside. The seasons turned. The vault of a river froze, then thawed like a vein carrying memory through the city. Inside. His fingers moved like dancers, measuring seconds with reverence. One winter evening, a child came to his workshop, holding a bird's broken music box. The melody was gone. The gears stuck. The child asked only, "Can you make it sing again?" The clockmaker didn't speak. He only smiled and took the music box in his hands. For 3 nights he worked, listening to the box as if it whispered secrets. He replaced no parts. He forced nothing. Instead, he waited, watched, understood, and then, on the 4th morning, he wound the box, and it sang, not loudly, but clearly. The child smiled, and the clockmaker just once laughed. They say the sound echoed into the bells above, and for a brief moment, the entire city heard it. A laugh made of time, but time, as always, moves on. Years passed. The clockmaker grew older, his hair whiter than Prague's fog, and one day he disappeared. No goodbye, no note, just an empty room. A ticking clock left behind, still wound, still perfect. Some say he became part of the clock, that when it chimes at noon, his spirit turns the gears, that he is the heartbeat of Prague. Others say he went deeper into time itself, found a space between seconds and settled there, where nothing ages and all things are remembered. And if you visit the city today, stand in the old square beneath the astronomical clock, close your eyes, and wait. You might hear not the bells, but the breath between them, and in that stillness, the clockmaker, measuring time not in hours, but in care. So tonight, as your thoughts slow, as your mind begins to wander through silent cities of its own, let your breath become the pendulum. Let your heart tick softly like a gear in balance, and know, somewhere in the world, a man once taught the stars to move on time crafted by hand. The cave where the paintings breathe. A serene descent into the ancient caves of Lascaux, where flickering torchlight brought to life the earliest dreams of humankind in the quiet of the earth. Beneath layers of soil and time, there is a place where dreams still cling to stone, a cave. Not just a hollow in rock, but a sanctuary, a whisper from the deep past. Lascaux, more than 17,000 years ago, someone stepped into the darkness with a torch in one hand and pigment in the other. They were not nameless. They had stories, families, songs lost to time. But here, their art remained. Imagine stepping into that cool silence. The air still, almost sacred, your feet brushing against ancient dust, your breath sounding loud against the hush of stone dot. Then, you lift your eyes, and they are there, a line of deer, graceful and mid-stride, a bison, its flank arched in motion, horses with eyes wide and wild, galloping along the walls, not just images, but life suspended in ochre, charcoal, and flame. The artists painted not to decorate, but to remember, to honor, to connect with something larger than the cold night. And the uncertain hunt they painted in the dark by the trembling light of fire. As the flames flickered, the animals seemed to move. They breathed. No words remain. No tools survive. but the walls speak. They speak of awe, of watching a herd move through the mist at dawn, of feeling the pulse of life in every hoofbeat. They speak of longing, of reverence, of stillness. No kings, no battles, just the world as it was seen through wondering eyes and hands, soft, human hands, pressing color onto stone as if to say, we were here, we saw beauty. You imagine one of them, a young woman kneeling with a bowl of red clay, her fingers dipped in color, tracing the arc of a horn, the curve of a tail. Around her, the fire crackles, shadows dance, and for a moment, she sees the walls come alive. In that space, art was not separate from life. It was life, the breath of the animal, the silence of the cave, the rhythm of the heart. All one, now thousands of years later. We cannot enter Lascaux. The real cave is closed, preserved, like a dream that cannot be touched, but replicas have been made, copies, echoes, because even in imitation, the spirit lingers. And in your mind, as you drift into stillness, you too can enter. Walk slowly, let the torches guide you. Hear the fire hiss softly, smell the stone and clay, feel the presence of those who came before, and see, as they once saw, the world come alive on the walls. Tonight, as you rest, imagine your breath rising like smoke, your thoughts becoming quiet as stone, and in the darkness behind your eyelids, a painted bison turns its head and walks again, because, in that cave, nothing is truly still. The paintings breathe. The garden beneath the sands. A tranquil tale of a hidden Persian paradise, of lost water channels, shaded courtyards, and the timeless search for balance in nature. In the heart of the desert, where the sun reigns in silence and the wind carries only dust, there once was a garden, not a garden of chance, but of intention, of wisdom, of patient hands and ancient minds, a paradise. Hidden beneath the sands, they called it a chahar bog, a garden divided into four, for streams, for paths, for quarters of harmony. It was more than a place, it was a vision, a reflection of the universe itself, contained within walls of clay and cool stone. Imagine now the desert heat pressing down, your skin warm with sunlight, your breath dry. And then, a threshold, you step beyond it, and everything changes. The air shifts, it is cooler, sweeter, the scent of jasmine and fig drifts gently. You hear the soft murmuring of water. A breeze moves through trees that offer not just shade, but sanctuary, cypress, pomegranate, olive, their roots deep in the soil, their leaves trembling in golden light. This garden was no accident. It lived because of the Connaught underground aqueducts built by engineers who knew how to read the land, water, channeled from mountains far away, flowed beneath your feet, invisible, steady, silent, and then it rose, 2 fountains, 2 pools. To the heart of the garden, a boy walks along a stone path, carrying a clay jug, He dips it into a shallow basin, watching the ripples shimmer outward. An elder sits under a tree, reading softly to himself the poetry of Hafez or whispers of Rumi. The garden is alive not in noise, but in stillness. Its geometry is precise, its spirit unmeasured. Each corner mirrors the heavens, east, west, north, south. It is both earth and paradise, order and wonder. The Persians believed that to care for a garden was to care for the soul. To water a tree was an act of faith. To sit in silence was a prayer. At night, lamps flickered along the garden paths. The stars above reflected in still pools below. Moonlight traced the leaves, silvering their edges. Crickets sang softly, and the garden slept, dreaming beneath the desert moon. Over centuries, the sands returned. Palaces crumbled, walls fell. The water moved elsewhere, but under the surface, some cannot still flow. And once in a while, someone finds a trace, a broken tile, a hidden channel, the scent of something green where nothing should grow. And so the memory remains, not just of trees, but of balance, of humans living with the land, not upon it, of patience, of beauty without noise. Tonight, as you breathe slowly, imagine walking through that gate. Feel the heat soften, hear the water flow beneath. Let the garden welcome you, shade your thoughts, cool your dreams. The desert may surround you, but here, beneath the sands, a paradise still waits. And in that quiet garden, you are never lost. You are home. The wind that spoke in Sanskrit. A meditative journey through ancient Indian scrolls, wandering sages, and the quiet rhythm of early philosophy. There was a time, long before clocks, when people told the hour by the way the light touched a banyan tree, or by how the wind moved through tall grass. It was in such a time, slow breathing, without urgency, that a language was whispered into the world, not shouted, not forced, whispered. Its name was Sanskrit. In the early morning, before the world stirred, the wind would rise, cool, soft. It passed through ashrams, nestled in forest clearings, and over stone steps wet with dew. It rustled palm leaf scrolls, resting beside sleeping scholars. It slipped between the lips of monks chanting verses half awake, and the verses were not hurried. They unfolded like petals. Tat fem asi, you are that, not an answer, a thought. An opening that the sages did not claim to know. They listened to silence, to fire, to rain on clay rooftops, to breath itself in forest groves. Rishis sat cross-legged for hours, watching the movement of clouds or the curve of a falling leaf. The mind, they believed, could mirror the stillness of a pond, but only if undisturbed. And so they walked slowly, spoke softly, and listened. More than they spoke, Sanskrit was not just words, it was vibration. Each syllable had weight. Resonance. To say "oh" was to feel the universe not just outside you, but within. They said it echoed the beginning of time. A sound older than fire, older than breath. A teacher would take a student, not to a room, but to a tree. There they would sit and wait. Hours might pass before the lesson began, and sometimes the lesson was simply this: watch the shadow move across that stone. That too is knowledge. Scrolls were written by hand, one slow line at a time. The script curved like river paths, like vines on temple walls. Ink made from soot. Pages dried under sun, tied with string and wrapped in cloth. Each scroll a breath, a memory, held with care. At night, the stars over the Ganges shimmered. Their reflections danced on the surface as pilgrims bathed in silence. Fires crackled on riverbanks. Chants rose gently, weaving with the night wind. And even now, when the noise of the modern world tries to drown out the past, you can still hear echoes. In temples, in books, in quiet corners of thought. The wind still speaks, if we are willing to listen. Tonight, as your thoughts begin to settle, let the sound of this ancient language wrap gently around your mind. Let each syllable be a slow step into calm. Let the wind carry you, not forward, not back, but inward, to where silence lives, to where meaning is not spoken, but felt. And in that silence, you will find you are already home. The astronomer's sandglass. A quiet walk through the life of an ancient stargazer, charting stars, watching shadows, and measuring time without ever rushing it. There once lived a man whose days began only when the stars disappeared. He lived, not by the sun, but by the sky. His name is not recorded in the great books. No marble statue was carved in his likeness, but every night he looked up and listened to time itself. He lived on the edge of a city that no longer exists, a place of stone walls, quiet courtyards, and lamps lit by oil before the first star blinked awake. In his small home there was no clock, only a sandglass, and the slow turning of the heavens. Each evening he would climb a worn stairwell to the flat roof above. There, on a low wooden bench, he would sit with scrolls, ink, and a heart full of stillness. He marked not just stars, but moments. How long it took for the moon to cross a window frame. How slowly shadows crawled across the face of his sundial when dawn arrived. He measured the night with care, not to conquer time, but to understand it. Each grain of sand that passed through his glass was a small surrender, a whisper that said, time does not belong to us. We belong to it. On colder nights, he wrapped himself in wool and watched Orion climb the sky. He saw in those stars a kind of ancient rhythm, a music played without a sound. Children would ask, "What do you see?" He would smile gently and say, "I see tomorrow and yesterday, both carried by light." They didn't understand, but they remembered the calm in his voice, the way he paused before speaking. His favorite tool was not a telescope, nor an astrolabe. It was a bowl of water, still, unmoving. There, in the reflection, he saw the night's face, and when wind stirred its surface, he waited for it to still again. Because clarity, he believed, comes after the storm. On days when clouds hid the sky, he did not grow restless. He cleaned his instruments, wrote poems, waited for the sky. To return, patience was part of his craft, and also part of his peace. One evening, a friend asked, "Why spend your life chasing stars?" He answered, "Because they do not hurry, they do not shout, they move with purpose, and in silence." When he grew old, he no longer wrote, he simply watched. And when his eyes failed, he listened, to wind, to crickets, to time as it passed, grain by grain, breath by breath. No grand discoveries, no golden plaques, only this, a life measured slowly, lived gently, like starlight falling on a quiet rooftop tonight. Let your thoughts slow as his did. Picture a sandglass turned gently in your hands. Feel the weight of time, not heavy but soft. You do not need to rush. The stars do not. The night does not. And you are already aligned with the rhythm of the sky. The lighthouse that dreamed in silence. A poetic tale of a forgotten coastal light, guiding souls, not just at sea, but in the silence of the mind. There was once a lighthouse, at the edge of the world, not marked on most maps, not remembered in many books, but it stood quiet, patient, eternal. It did not flash. It did not blare. Its light was soft, like a candle behind old glass. Its sound was silence, thick with wind, salt, and time. Sailors spoke of it in hushed tones, not as a structure, but as a presence. A watcher of tides, a keeper of stillness. They said the lightkeeper was a woman, though no one had seen her. Some believed she had always been there. Others, that she had never truly existed. Only the lighthouse remained, perched high above cliffs, washed endlessly by waves. Its stone body wore the weather like a robe, moss and mist woven into every seam. Inside, the spiral staircase curved like a seashell. Each step a breath. Each landing a memory. There were no clocks, only tide charts, and a kettle that sang only when ready. The keeper, whoever she was, tended to the great lamp with reverence. She lit it not to warn of rocks, but to calm the drifting. She believed that some ships did not need direction, only reassurance that the world was still watching when storms came, and waves crashed against the cliffs like ancient drums. She sat by the window and listened to the storm. Yes, but also to herself. It was said that once a sailor caught in fog heard music from the tower, not sung but felt, a melody made of absence, of distance, of longing. The light, when it turned, moved slowly, like a breath in sleep. Each revolution a promise. I am here, still holding space. She wrote letters to no one, folded them and placed them in glass bottles, set them adrift at dawn. Not to be read, but to be let go. Some say that after many years, the keeper disappeared. Others say she became the lighthouse, that her soul pulses gently in the lantern room, tending the flame in eternal silence. And the lighthouse, that dreaming lighthouse, still stands, unseen by most. But sometimes, on the quietest nights, Its glow can be felt not at sea, but within. Perhaps tonight you feel it now, a calm, far off, but familiar. A light that does not demand, but welcomes. You are safe, the world is turning, and somewhere a quiet lighthouse is dreaming with you. The wind-carved temples of Petra, a gentle walk through a city of stone and silence, where wind and time have etched sacred memories into red rock. There is a place where the wind has become an artist, and the stone its patient canvas. It lies hidden in the Jordanian desert, tucked between rose-colored cliffs, where light bends softly and silence settles like dust. Petra, a name whispered across centuries, a city not built but revealed. You arrive at dawn, when the air is still cool and the sky stretches wide and pale. The entrance is narrow, a passage through towering rocks called the Sick, where walls rise like ancient guardians. You walk slowly, each footstep softened by centuries of sand. Birdsong echoes above, then fades. You are alone, yet not lonely. The path turns, and there it is. The treasury, not gold or jewels, but columns carved directly into stone, touched by morning light that makes it glow as if it remembers every traveler who ever stood before it in awe. You do not rush, there is no need. This is a place meant to be moved through like a dream. The wind here speaks softly. It weaves through broken archways, over worn steps, through the high hollows where once incense burned and prayers rose into desert skies. Further in, the monastery awaits, larger, quieter, like a cathedral carved not for gods, but for silence. You climb slowly, the path a gentle rhythm of breath and stone. At the top, the horizon spreads like parchment. You sit. The wind brushes past your cheeks like a memory you can't name. Here, in Petra, nothing feels hurried. Even time seems reluctant to pass. Stone columns lean gently, as if tired from standing. Caves, once homes and temples, open like mouths long closed. You enter one, cool, dim, and still. Inside, you feel the hush of centuries. Not emptiness, but presence. You imagine the lives lived here, traders, scholars, priests, children playing among the ruins before they were ruins. You see a pot left by a doorway, cracked but intact. A shallow dish of water reflecting nothing, but sky. The Nabateans who shaped this city are long gone. But their work remains, not as ruins, but as whispers. They let the rocks speak, and in your quiet breath you listen. As the sun sinks low, Petra glows again, not with light, but with warmth. You walk back, not the same way you came, because the wind has changed the path just slightly. You pause one last time, where the treasury gleams in fading gold, and you understand this was never a place for treasure. It is the treasure, not to be taken, but to be remembered. You close your eyes, feel the wind, feel the stone, feel the silence becoming sleep. the library beneath the waves, an imagined sunken archive where lost scrolls, forgotten languages, and silent stories drift in slow underwater currents. Breathe in and imagine a place where books do not rest on shelves, but float, drifting, gently, like jellyfish in a twilight sea. You are underwater, but there is no fear here. Only stillness, only depth, and silence, thick, warm, and endless. You move slowly, your limbs weightless in this gentle blue world. Around you, walls of coral rise like ancient columns. Between them, scrolls wrapped in kelp flutter softly in unseen tides. This is the library beneath the waves, not made by humans, but remembered by the ocean. Each scroll carries a story that the surface forgot, a sailor's lullaby from a sunken ship, a philosopher's thoughts inked on papyrus before his island vanished in a storm, a forgotten map, not to land, but to a dream. Here, ink never fades. It glows faintly, luminescent as the fish that drift past. Their scales shimmer like scattered words waiting to be read. You float past a column wrapped in barnacles, tucked. Inside, you find a book bound in sea glass. Its pages flicker open with the pulse of the tide. It tells of a woman who spoke to dolphins, and a city that built temples of salt. Further in, you pass through an arch of ivory coral. Behind it, a chamber opens, wide and dark. Inside, stories drift like snowflakes. You reach for one, a piece of driftwood. Carved in runes you almost understand. It speaks of the moon and tides and time, and how they all once sang together. In the same language, the deeper you go, the quieter it becomes. Even your heartbeat feels like an echo in a vast cathedral of water. You come to a place where no walls remain, only columns made of current, and shelves made of light. Here, the scrolls do not tell stories. They are the stories. They float, unfold, and fade. Not lost, just sleeping. You find a stone tablet, half buried in sand. It bears a single word, remember, you do. Not with your mind, but with something older, deeper. You close your eyes. A fish brushes past your hand. It leaves no ripple, only calm. You let go of the scroll in your fingers. It drifts upward, toward the dim glow of the surface, like a final thought leaving the page. The current moves softly. You do not resist. You drift backward, slowly, like a book returning to the shelf. And in the distance, the ocean turns a page. The whispering stones of Göbekli Tepe. Close your eyes. Let your thoughts settle. Let the fire's gentle crackling guide you into stillness. Now, imagine a place so old that time itself seems to pause in reverence. Before pyramids rose, from desert sands, before Stonehenge stood beneath the cloudy skies of Britain, there was Göbekli Tepe, high upon the hills of southeastern Anatolia. The earth once held a secret. Buried beneath centuries of soil and silence, waited a circle of stones, massive, mysterious, and whispering forgotten truths. The air is dry here. The wind hums low and steady, as if remembering, As you walk slowly toward the site, dust stirs at your feet and the stones begin to appear. Tall, smooth pillars, carved not by machines, but by hands long vanished. Somewhere around 9600 BCE, when most of the world still wondered, these ancient people gathered. They carved, they aligned. They built not shelters, but sanctuaries, not homes, but something sacred. Each stone stands like a sentinel, T-shaped and tall, silent guardians of belief. Carved onto their surfaces are animals, foxes, snakes, vultures, boars, etched with care, as if each figure held meaning we no longer understand. There are no written records, no names, no kings, or battles to remember. Just symbols, just silence, just stone. Some archaeologists believe it was a temple, a place where early humans met the sacred. Others think it was a calendar of stars or a map of spirits. But in the stillness of night, beneath the dark dome of ancient skies, perhaps it was something simpler. A space for wonder. A gathering to feel small beneath the universe. The people who built Göbekli Tepe did not yet know metal. They had no wheels. They hunted, they gathered, and yet they lifted stones weighing up to 20 tons, moving them without beasts of burden, with only ropes, ramps, and pure will. And then, after centuries of use, they buried it, deliberately, carefully, layer upon layer of soil and rubble, as if tucking a sacred secret to sleep. For thousands of years, the world forgot, until one day in the 1990s, a shepherd led his flock near the hill. A farmer's plough struck stone, and slowly the earth began to remember. Archaeologists uncovered the site bit by bit, brushing away time, revealing a story with no words, only questions. Who were these people? What brought them together? What dreams did they carve into stone? As you drift deeper into rest, picture the soft golden light of sunrise spilling across the stones. Hear the rustle of robes, the low hum of chants, the scent of herbs on morning winds. Göbekli Tepe does not offer answers. It offers presence, stillness. A pause in history that says, we were here, we believed, we built something beautiful, and now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts grow quiet, let those ancient stones stand watch beside your dreams. Let the soft mystery of their shapes, their carvings, their silence, hold you gently through the night. You are safe. You are still, and the stars, as they once did millennia ago, still shine above sacred ground. Sleep well. The starlit temple of Persepolis, a tranquil exploration of ancient Persia, where time slows beneath the constellations and sacred knowledge flickers in the silence of stone. Close your eyes. Let the present dissolve like a grain of sand. Slipping through ancient fingers, we drift now, to a plateau kissed by starlight, to a place where time breathes slowly, where silence speaks more deeply than words. We arrive in Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of ancient Persia, but not the Persepolis of bustling courts or imperial feasts, not the Persepolis of conquests or kings. This is a quieter Persepolis, a hidden corner of it, where a temple once stood, dedicated not to power, but to the stars. The temple faced the night sky like an open book. Its roof, now long gone, once framed the constellations. Stone columns stood like frozen sentinels, each carved with spirals and symbols mirroring the heavens above. Here, ancient priests moved without haste. Their robes brushed the sandstone floors with a whisper. They watched the skies, not to command the future, but to listen patiently to the rhythm of the cosmos. They believed that each star was a thought, a word spoken by the divine, the alignment of planets, the flicker of a comet. These were not omens of doom, but conversations, quiet and celestial. The temple was built with sacred geometry. Every angle echoed a harmony, every stone aligned with purpose. North, east, solstice, equinox. The mathematics of peace. There was no idol, no statue, only an open flame, fed slowly with desert herbs, its scent mingling with the night. Air pilgrims would travel for days to sit in stillness here. They didn't ask questions, they didn't seek answers. They came to be, to breathe beneath the stars and remember how small and sacred life could be. And when the flame flickered, low, and the desert winds whispered through the colonnades, the priests would hum a low chant, a sound more felt than heard, a note older than language, a lullaby sung to the universe itself. Eventually, the temple was forgotten, buried by sandstorms, cracked by time. Its stones fell inward, its silence reclaimed by the earth. But when the stars are clear, and you listen carefully enough, you might still hear a breath of it, in the hush between the winds, in the space between heartbeats. A temple that once looked to the sky, still dreaming beneath it. Sleep now, with the stars watching gently above you, and the silence of Persepolis wrapped around you, like a blanket of ancient light. The weaver of Samarkand. In the heart of the Silk Road, where caravans once moved like slow rivers across the desert, there stood a quiet city of turquoise domes and whispering alleys. Samarkand, a place not only of trade, but of dreams woven between east and west. In one such alley, away from the bustling bazaars and the clatter of coin and spice, lived an old woman known simply as the weaver. Her workshop was modest. A wooden frame, a few faded rugs, spools of dyed thread, and walls lined with stories. No signs hung above her door, no apprentice worked by her side. Yet travelers from faraway lands would seek her out. Guided by rumor more than reason, she did not speak much. Her eyes carried the stillness of centuries, and her hands moved with the slowness of someone in no hurry to reach the end, to watch. Her work was to witness something ancient, the kind of care that makes silence feel alive. She wove not only patterns, but memories. Her tapestries held the color of dawn on the Oxus River, the geometry of starlight reflected in desert wells, and the softness of wind touching a traveler's cheek after days of silence. No two were ever the same. Some claimed her rugs brought peace to troubled minds. Others said if you slept upon one, you'd dream of places you had never been. yet somehow remembered. They were not grand works, not gold-threaded or royal. They were quiet, gentle, filled with breath and shadow. Once a young man came to her, a merchant's son, restless and burdened with ambition. He asked for a rug to impress a noble visitor, something large, ornate, expensive. The weaver did not. Refuse. She simply asked him to sit. She offered no tea, no food, only silence and thread. For hours the loom sang softly between them, wood brushing wool, wool passing wool. The young man spoke of his travels, his doubts, his fears of failing to live up to his father's name. The weaver only nodded, never stopping the rhythm of her hands. When she finished, she handed him a small square of cloth, barely larger than a book cover, a simple pattern, muted colors. The merchant's son frowned. "This is not enough," he said, but she smiled and replied only, "It is more than you asked." He returned home, disappointed. But that night, as he held the cloth in his lap, something in him slowed, his breath deepened. He slept without dreams, and awoke with tears he couldn't name. Years later, he would return, older, humbler, asking not for a rug, but for the story behind her silence. But by then, the weaver was gone, her workshop closed, the loom still. Only a few threads remained, caught on the wind, carried across Samarkand like whispers stitched into the air. Some say she was never truly there. A mirage of memory spun from the soul of the Silk Road itself, but her tapestries still rest in quiet homes, in temples, and in the corners of forgotten libraries. They continue to hold space, to soften hearts, and in their threads, time does not pass, it breathes. The monastery above the clouds, where time drifted like incense, and silence held the weight of wisdom, far beyond the crowded plains and the thundering rivers, beyond even the last cultivated valley, where rice sways like prayer in the wind. There rises a spine of stone, sharp, cold, eternal. The mountain range cuts into the heavens like the ribcage of the earth, and among its highest peaks, hidden in the clouds and unreachable by road, rests an ancient monastery. Few know its name, fewer still have seen its gates taught to reach it. Pilgrims must first surrender something, often their haste, sometimes their certainty, and, for the truly fortunate, their need to arrive. The path is narrow, winds howl like forgotten chants. Rocks shift underfoot as if testing the walker's resolve. Snow falls even in midsummer. The sun, when it appears, does not. Warm, it reveals. But for those who continue, those who walk not to conquer the trail, but to listen to it, a wooden door eventually appears from the fog. It is plain, weathered, and it does not open by force or knock. But one day, maybe not the first, or even the third, it opens quietly, as if it always knew you were coming. Inside, there are no grand halls, no gold statues, no relics behind glass, only silence. Deep living, soft as snow resting on pine. The monks here do not speak often. Their voices have grown slow, like the bells they ring only at dawn. They move through the halls like thoughts unspoken, present, but never intrusive. Each one wakes before the sun, when the stars still hang like tiny lamps above the peaks. They begin the day not with words, but with breath. Breath that joins the wind slipping through carved wooden screens. Breath that honors the gift of returning to this place once more. There is no hurry, no agenda, a bowl of warm tea, a sweeping of the stone floor, the soft turning of an ancient page. They do not pray for miracles. They do not ask for enlightenment. Instead, they notice how the light enters through cracks in the wood, how moss grows quietly on the shaded side of the wall, how silence expands when it is not filled. It is said that the monastery has no history, no dates, no founding. It simply is, like the mountain, like the wind. But there are stories, whispered from one monk to another, when the clouds hang low. Stories of a scroll that once held a single word, unreadable yet understood. Of a visitor who stayed for 100 days and spoke only one sentence. Of a night when the moon cast the shadow of a Bodhi tree on the stone floor, though no such tree grows within miles. And still, the monks do not write these things down. They live them, then let them go. In the evening, a single bell rings. Its tone lingers long after it fades, vibrating not in the air, but in the chest. One by one, the monks return to their chambers, where a single candle burns low. No one says good night. No one needs to. The silence is enough, and when morning comes and a new breath begins, the monastery remains unchanged, yet always new. For those who once visited, even if only in dream, its memory returns, not as a place, but as a feeling. The stillness between thoughts, the warmth of tea in cold hands, the echo of a bell that no longer rings, but is somehow still heard. The island of whispering stones, where the wind spoke through carved memories, and every silence held a story far beyond the well-known seas. Where trade routes vanish and compasses grow uncertain, there lies an island forgotten by time. It is not marked in maps. It drifts, some say, not across the ocean, but through memory itself. A place you do not find, until you have truly forgotten what you were seeking. From the deck of an old wooden vessel, sailors once glimpsed it through a fog that shimmered like silk. Its shores were not made of sand, but of pale stone, rounded, smooth, and faintly warm to the touch, as if they remembered the sun from another lifetime. No birds called overhead. No beasts roamed. Only the sound of the sea lapping against the stone, and something else. A whisper, not words exactly, but the trace of words. The echo of thoughts never spoken aloud. Those who set foot on the island felt it immediately, a hush. Not silence born of emptiness, but silence filled with presence, like a room waiting for someone to remember it. The stones, scattered across the island like forgotten constellations, were not merely rocks. Each one bore an etching, not letters, not pictures, but shapes that seemed to shift just beyond understanding. Some were tall and narrow, like standing monks. Others lay flat, half buried in moss, as if sleeping. Visitors found themselves drawn to one stone above all, never the same for each person. They would sit before it, often for hours, sometimes days, saying nothing, only listening, and slowly, the whisper would return. A feeling first, a childhood scent, a forgotten lullaby, a memory that did not belong to them, yet felt familiar. No one knew who carved the stones. Perhaps the island itself did. Perhaps they had always been there, like dreams waiting to be dreamt. Some spoke of a grove at the island's center, where the stones grew tall like trees, and where the wind would pass through their carved hollows to create tones unlike any flute or bell. It was said that on certain nights, when the moon was full and the sea calm, the entire island would hum, not loudly, but deeply, a resonance felt in the bones. The elders of distant coastal villages spoke of a time, long ago, when lost sailors returned from the island with different eyes. They no longer argued, no longer feared the dark. They would sit quietly, by the fire, holding nothing, yet seeming full. They had no stories to share, only peace. It is said that those who leave the island never remember how they arrived. The ship appears as if summoned. The sails rise with no wind, but the sound of the stones, the way he listened, remains. And when the world becomes too loud, too fast, too heavy, those who once walked its shore feel a pull beneath their ribs, not longing, exactly, not homesickness, but something quieter, a whisper, a single note, reminding them that somewhere across an ocean not found on any chart, an island still waits, its stones listening, its silence breathing, its stories, unspoken, yet never lost. The manuscripts of the wind, invisible. In a desert where no ink remains, the air itself carries the wisdom of vanished scholars. There is a desert, vast and forgotten, where sand covers the bones of empires and time walks barefoot. No cities remain, no columns stand. Even the sun seems older there, less interested in rising, less urgent in its descent, and yet, beneath the silence, a presence lingers. Travelers tell of strange moments when the wind changes direction, and the air becomes heavy with something that is not dust, but memory. They speak of the manuscripts of the wind, not scrolls, not bound books, not carved tablets, but something lighter, invisible, yet real. There was once a city here, they say, a place of study and stillness, built by a people who believed that words held more weight when not written down. Their scholars, trained for years to compose thoughts so precise, so perfectly attuned to breath and silence, that they could speak a sentence into the air and let it linger there. For centuries, the desert wind became their library. It carried their philosophies across dunes, whispering them into stone crevices, planting them in the hollow trunks of oasis trees, and folding them gently into the fur of passing animals. No armies came to destroy this city. No fire burned its scrolls. It simply dissolved. Its people departed, leaving behind no ruins, only the teachings they had gifted to the wind. And still, when the weather is right, when the air is dry and the horizon flickers like a dream, you might hear them not as voices, not as language, but as rhythm, as understanding without words. Some travelers report sudden clarity, as if the answer to a long-held question had quietly landed beside them, spoken in a tongue they did not know they knew. Others feel the wind, pulling gently at their clothing, guiding them to sit, to close their eyes, and simply listen. It is a listening that requires no ears, only stillness, only breath. Even the animals seem to know. Birds fly lower here, foxes pause mid-step, camels stop without command, blinking slowly as if remembering something important. Local nomads, few and far between, do not fear this part of the desert. They call it the breathing place. They leave no markings, no prayers, only silence. Some believe that each whisper caught by the wind becomes part of the listener, woven gently into their skin, their dreams, their choices. Not knowledge, but wisdom, not data, but resonance. The kind of truth that cannot be quoted yet is never forgotten. It is said that if you return to the desert many years later, the wind will remember you. It will greet you with a phrase you once heard in a dream, softly, as if spoken from within your own breath, and then it will move on, for the manuscripts never stop. They travel, folding over mountains, brushing through the canopies of quiet forests, slipping between pages of blank books, waiting to be noticed. And though no one can bind them, and no ink can hold them, they endure, each word composed not to be remembered, but to awaken what was already sleeping within you. The monastery at the edge of the earth, where silence meets snow and time folds in on itself. High in the forgotten folds of a northern range, beyond the frostbitten forests, and beneath skies so wide they seemed to breathe, stood a monastery. Carved into the cliffs, its stones were older than most histories, weathered smooth by winds that whispered ancient names no tongue had spoken in centuries. There were no roads to this place, only narrow footpaths cut into the ice by generations of wandering monks. Pilgrims came rarely. When they did, they often wept at the stillness, as if they had crossed not just distance, but time itself. Inside, the monastery glowed faintly with the warmth of oil lamps and the hushed sound of prayer bowls. Nothing mechanical ever entered its walls. Time moved differently there, not measured in hours, but in snowfall, in the flicker of a flame, in the length of a breath drawn before dawn. The monks spoke little. Their silence was not emptiness, but a kind of listening, listening to the wind, to the low hum of the mountains, to each other's presence. Each morning began the same, the slow lighting of the inner chamber, a single match, then the soft bloom of a flame catching the wick, followed by a pause, a full minute of stillness, then the gentle chime of a bell. The day had begun. Meals were simple: barley stew, wild herbs, and snowmelt warmed over coals. Each bite taken slowly, reverently, as if tasting the season itself. The library held only a few books. Not many were needed. A collection of poems from long-dead sages, a text on the movements of stars, and a single scroll written by a monk who had once lived there, who had never left the mountain, yet described worlds within. They called him the dreaming scribe. He wrote of trees that remembered, and rivers that could whisper futures if one listened in silence. His scroll was unadorned, but every line shimmered with something timeless. A breath of the divine, perhaps, or the weight of understanding. At dusk, the monks lit incense. The scent curled slowly into the air. Pine, cedar, a touch of myrrh. And they would gather near the cliff's edge, where the view stretched into an endless sweep of white and blue. Some said the sea could be seen from there on a clear day. Others believed it was sky meeting ice, blurring the border between earth. An eternity, no one argued. It didn't matter. The view was not something to define, but to feel. There was a story told among them that once, many centuries ago, a single traveler reached the monastery in the heart of winter. He carried nothing but a question. What he asked, and what he was told, remains unknown. But it's said he stayed for 3 days and 3 nights. And when he left, he smiled at the wind as if it had answered him. The monks never spoke of him again. When storms came, the monastery vanished in mist. Even the birds fell silent. And still, inside, life continued, slowly, intentionally, without need for the world beyond the peaks. Some believed that those who lived there grew so attuned to stillness. They could hear snow falling before it, touched the ground. Perhaps they could, or perhaps, in that quiet monastery at the edge of the earth, stillness itself was the only sound worth hearing. The silent sculptors of the Valley of Sand. The valley that waits. In a land where the wind speaks more often than people do, there lies a valley. A quiet hollow between golden cliffs, forgotten by time, and remembered only by the sand. The Valley of Sand. It is not marked on any modern map. Its name drifts like dust between scrolls and memories, carried only by the lips of travelers who no longer travel. Each dawn, a pale light washes across the dunes, cool and blue and ghost-like. There are no cities nearby. No roads, only silence, and the slow breath of the desert. The wind here is not cruel. It does not howl or whip or rage. It whispers. It brushes gently across the face of the earth, lifting grains of sand from one place to another, as if adjusting a great unfinished tapestry, and within this tapestry shifting. Timeless and warm stand the works of the silent sculptors, the artists of dust. No one remembers the first sculptor. No scroll speaks his name. But the shapes remain. Some say it began with a wanderer, tired of the noise of the world. He arrived, with only his hands, and a longing to shape silence, with no tools but water, time and breath. He carved a figure from the sand, then another still, not to be seen, but to be felt. Figures of women with braided hair, their faces turned toward the wind, camels resting with eyes closed, towers that leaned slightly, as if listening to the horizon. Over decades, more sculptors came. Some stayed for years, others only for a season. They did not speak, only carved and slept beneath the stars. Their works were not monuments, but moments. Each sculpture would slowly change with the breeze. An ear softened, a shoulder reshaped, a foot erased by a century of grains, and yet they sculpted, as if knowing the beauty was not in permanence, but in patience, the wind as witness. Even now, if you find your way to the valley, if you arrive at the right hour, with quiet feet and a steady heart, you may see them, statues half buried in the dunes, emerging like memories from beneath the sands. You might see a hand reaching outward, or the gentle curve of a cheek. You may find a sleeping lion, its face softened by time, still guarding nothing but air. The wind will greet you kindly. It will wrap around your shoulders like an old friend. And if you sit and close your eyes and listen, you may hear the chisel of breath, the echo of a palm pressing sand, the hush of creation without a single word. For the silent sculptors are never truly gone. They remain in the rhythm of the dunes, in the shade of wind-carved hollows, in the fleeting beauty of things meant to fade. They teach us that art can be made not to last, but simply to exist. For a moment, for a breeze, for a sigh, and that is enough. The weaver of the celestial loom, threads of the sky, far beyond the lands of war and kings, above the forests and the mountains, there lived an old weaver who stitched the sky. No one knew her name, no one remembered when she had begun, but each night, as the world quieted and sleep approached, she would lift her loom toward the heavens and weave. She did not weave wool or silk, but starlight. Her hands, old and gentle, would pull invisible threads from the cool night air. Strands of memory, strands of silence, strands of wonder, and slowly, patiently, she would shape the constellations, one by one, a soft flicker here, a curved trail there. She wove the forms we now call myths. A swan in flight, a hunter's bow, a drifting fish, a cradle of twins, each placed with intention, held in balance, never rushed. The loom that spun the cosmos. The loom was no ordinary loom. Its frame was made of moonlight and cedar, its shuttle carved from ancient bone, smooth as sleep itself. With each pull, the weaver hummed a quiet, tuneless sound. Barely more than breath, it was not music. It was memory as she wove. She remembered lovers who looked skyward, sailors who steered by stars, poets who whispered to the dark. And so the threads carried all of it. Longings, questions, the hush before dreams. Each night's work was temporary. With the coming dawn, the tapestry would fade, the stars would soften, and the loom would rest. But she did not grieve its vanishing. She knew beauty need not last to be real. It simply needs to arrive and be received. The child who watched. One evening, a child from a nearby village wandered to the weaver's hill. He had followed a soft rustle, or perhaps a scent, or maybe something deeper still, a longing he didn't yet understand. He saw the old woman there, silhouetted by constellations not yet born, her hands moving with the quiet wisdom of tides. He said nothing. She smiled without turning. Night after night, the child returned. Sometimes he watched in silence. Sometimes he slept by the loom, his dreams full of stars that moved like dancers. He learned not through lessons, but through presence. He began to see the threads. In the wind, in people's laughter, in the curve of riverbanks, he learned that weaving was not about control, but listening. Not about power, but wonder. And over the years, he grew. The weaver grew older still, and one morning, after a night of stars, shaped like stories, she was gone. Only the loom remained, and the sound of the wind gently brushing the sky. Part 4. The sky still wears her patterns. Now when you gaze upward on a quiet night, when the world is still and sleep waits just beyond your thoughts, look closely. The constellations still carry her touch. The arc of Orion's belt, the gentle curve of the Milky Way, the lonely gleam of a single star just out of place. But exactly right. Perhaps somewhere someone else now weaves. Or perhaps the sky remembers on its own. But one thing is certain. In every quiet night, in every whispered story beneath the stars, in every child who wonders what lies beyond, she is there, thread by thread, light by light, and in sleep, as dreams begin their gentle rise, the celestial loom continues, weaving silence into stars, and stars into peace.